On this episode of Mom Sipping Sangria,
we started the 90s. Probably you remember, you were probably both working or about to start working using a typewriter.
I'm good. Let's do it.
Welcome to Mom Sipping Sangria. I'm Sheila Walsh with the lovely and talented, what the hell? Anita Reynolds MacArthur. I swear I have not been into the Sangria's Anita Reynolds MacArthur. Hello, lovely lady.
Hello, Sheila. You all right there?
I don't know. We'll just play it by ear. And on this episode, we are going to take a trip down memory lane. Since we can't, do too many trips elsewhere, Kathy Kenzora of History of the 90's podcast will be sipping sangria with us very shortly. And in honor of Kathy and all things 90s, our Sangria recipe this week is called Spiked 90's Throwback Strawberry and Kiwi Sangria. Cheers.
Ooh, I see what you've done there. Because strawberry kiwi is a throwback to the flavors of the 90s, if I remember correctly.
I think so too. When I saw that, I'm like, I still have things that are strawberry and kiwi mixed today, but I remember peach schnapps. Was that a 90s thing?
Sweet though. It was super sweet at the time.
Yeah. Anyway.
I remember.
So how are you, Anita?
I can't complain. Summer's here, and the kids are out of school now. So, and we're finally going to get to see my dad and hit my stepmother Jill. They're vaccinated, so next week they'll be up, and it'll be almost a year since we've seen them.
Wow!
That's
crazy.
I mean, when we say a year, we see my dad every month, even though he's in Montreal and we're in the Toronto area. We see them every month. So this has been so long for us. So we're very, very excited.
So you have a big hug or hugs coming. Have you been doing Zoom? You've been doing Zoom or FaceTime or whatever back and forth with him?
Yeah. But that can only take you so far. It's really nice to see people in person, right? So
I know. Mm-hmm. It's so true.
And how about you?
Same thing. Kids are done school. Mm-hmm. It's officially summer break around here, and looking forward to some downtime as well. So July's coming up. Happy July. Happy summer. So Anita, you and I met in the 90s, which is impossible since we're only 29.
And holding.
That's right. So it does seem like yesterday, but the 90s were 25 years ago. I was figuring out, you got married in 96, so I met you a couple of years prior. We're talking.
You don't remember the date?
Wasn't that Greg? I think Greg and I were fighting. It was Cirque du Soleil. We weren't talking to each other.
You were fighting. I was told, just be careful. She can be very nice, but we're not too sure how she's going to be tonight because Greg and her were fighting. I'm like, this is how I'm going to meet this person. And of course, you were lovely. You were lovely. And it was the fall of 1993. Just so you know. So that makes it 28 years.
No. Can't happen.
28 years.
So let me ask you.
For 30, hold on. For 30 years, we got to do something.
Oh, 100%. I think we should. Well, I was going to say go back to Jamaica, but that's a whole other story. And I don't think they're going to let us back on the island. So let's not. We'll go somewhere else. But thinking of the 90s and, God, 30 years ago, what comes to mind? If I just throw out 90s, what comes to mind other than, of course, us meeting?
Okay, so first things that come to mind are things like mullets, big hair, Shania Twain and crop tops, grunge. Mm-hmm. I know Greg is really into Pearl Jam, and I believe that's when grunge came into being. Yep. And then for movies and things, I was saying Pretty Woman was really huge, and then there was that saying, "You had me at hello." Do you remember what movie that was from?
Tom Cruise, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Jerry Maguire.
And who said that?
Yeah.
Who said it?
Tom Cruise, wasn't it?
No, it was Renee Zellweger.
Oh, she said it.
Well,
you see how our memory fades?
I know. Everyone thinks it was Tom Cruise.
That's why I can hardly wait till Kathy gets on and she's going to clear some stuff up for us.
And so what things come to mind for you?
Well, you clearly did your homework because I was just kind of thinking off the top of my head. I was just thinking marriages, both yours and mine. And this is where all my friends started getting married, and a few like yourself had kids in the 90s as well. OJ and Princess Diana's death. And, oddly enough, Anita and her husband Ian and myself and Greg were together both of those situations. We were watching the chase in an apartment in Toronto, our apartment in Toronto, the O.J. Simpson saga, and then we were together the night that Princess Diana died. So that was crazy.
That's right.
I started my career in the early 90s, and in one of my first jobs, I was the overnight DJ and the morning newscaster. See how I bring it around and I'm segueing into here? The morning newscaster was a woman by the name of Kathy Kenzora. Kathy went on to a career covering the biggest news stories of the 90s, and then she took all that material, transferred it to an amazing podcasting show and shows, and the rest is history of the 90s. What do you think of that, Kathy?
Oh, that was amazing. Amazing.
The award-winning podcasts were available wherever you listen to podcasts. Welcome, Kathy Kenzora. What the hell?
Hi,
Kathy, Anita, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Anita.
I've heard so many wonderful things for years and years and years. It's so nice to actually get to see you.
Oh, thank you. It's so nice to chat with you guys.
Yeah.
Like actual human beings that are my family.
So true. Well,
It's so nice to meet you, Kathy. I know you and Sheila go way back, but for the rest of us, can you tell us how you got into news and what led to your successful podcast in the first place, History of the 90s?
Well, I started off working in radio in the late 80s, believe it or not. 1989, after taking journalism in college, and then worked in different radio stations around the Greater Toronto area for about 10 years. It was great, loved it, really exciting, covering news stories as a reporter, traveling around to, cover all kinds of stories from politics to criminal trials to sporting events. It was really fun. But after about 10 years, I knew I was going to be wanting to settle down soon and have kids. And that kind of career was not going to be very doable. It can be doable, but I thought that maybe it was time to switch to something a little more 9 to 5. So I went and worked for the Ontario government for a number of years doing communications, public relations, that sort of thing. Zoom ahead to the 2000s, late 2000s, when podcasting became a thing. I was an avid listener because I always loved the oral storytelling of radio. So right away when podcasts were introduced, I was listening right from the get-go. And eventually I came up with this idea to do a podcast called The History of 1995, which looked at events that happened that year. And then since then have expanded it to cover history of the 90s. And the reason why I went with History of 1995 was because that was the year of OJ, but also the year of the Paul Bernardo trial, which I covered in 1995. And I had saved all the audio tapes and all my notebooks and everything from that trial. I had put it in a box and hidden it away. And then I found it a few years ago and thought, wow, this would make a great podcast. And it kind of went from there.
Crazy. And, I was working in a newsroom during that year, 95. And I remember, and you and I had talked about this, I remember our reporter who covered it was really affected by that. So, I want to get into the podcast, but let's talk about you were at the front of seeing things that people don't want to see, almost like the first responders, right? You're hearing it, you're watching awful things in that courtroom. How do you distance yourself so you're not taking that home, like that Bernardo thing and all these other horrible things that you covered?
Yeah, I to be honest, I think it's just, it's not for everybody. And it's the way my mind works. I am able to compartmentalize a lot of things and just focus on it in the moment and then put it behind me when I need to. But there certainly were times, days that were rough at the trial when, we saw or heard upsetting evidence that I would go home and have to have a good cry. Like it was, there was no other way around it. And what I find interesting is it didn't affect me as much, some of the things, as it does now, looking back at it when I think about it, because I have children of my own, girls who were, in the last few years of the age that Leslie and Mahaffey were when they were kidnapped. And it really, when I kind of started to think of it that way, it really hit home more. It felt like maybe back then I was a little too naive to feel all the feelings. And also I was too busy on a day-to-day basis covering the trial and filing reports and hits on the way home, hits in the morning when I was driving to court. So it was hard to, to really take a step back and have it fully affect you until for some people it was right away. Other people, could have been years later.
Once you have kids, everything changes. You look at the world through a different lens. And even the odd time that I've still, pop into newsrooms and do some freelance stuff, it is tough. And because I'm like, oh my God, that's Lila's age, or, whatever. You really do kind of transcend. Sorry, I know we kind of went off and now we're back to your podcast. So off the top, we were talking about how, many of us can't do a trip this summer because of the pandemic. And so Anita came up with, let's take a trip down memory lane. Well done, Anita.
I love
it. Where do we start?
Well, you can look at the 90s, probably completely different if you start in 1990 to 1999. A lot happened in those 10 years. And a lot of it has to do with technology, the internet. So we started the 90s, probably you remember, you were probably both working or about to start working, using a typewriter, an electronic typewriter or a manual typewriter and a fax machine. And by the end of the 90s, you were using email and you were maybe on the World Wide Web searching things, but you were certainly using email in your office. You weren't using fax machines anymore, but you were at the beginning of the 90s. So it was such a big change. And I don't know, I'm sure there's been other decades, but it just feels technologically, we advanced so much in the 90s, including cell phones. We started off the 90s with the only cell phone I had was the big brick cell phone for work, or eventually we really moved up and we had the car phone. It was attached to the car. Like you couldn't take it out of the car. But it was pretty cool that you could talk on the phone in the car, but you couldn't take it anywhere with you. So you were still using payphones with quarters or a phone card. Do you remember having those phone cards, your Bell calling card, so you could make calls without having to have change? I remember it was a big deal. I had to have and then it would get charged right onto your Bell bill at the end of the month. It would show that you'd made these cards. You'd punch it in, and
I wasn't that advanced.
I know.
I was always looking for a quarter.
Exactly. So that's one place to start with the 90s, is the huge changes in technology for sure. But it was also a time when our television viewing was really different than it is now, because of streaming services, obviously. But back in the 90s, we had the must-see TV or appointment television. You probably remember those terms or have heard those terms, things like Seinfeld and Friends. Everybody watched them as they were aired. There was maybe, if you were advanced, you were taping it on your VCR. Usually it didn't work. Usually you thought you set the timer and it didn't work. So you had to watch it live if you didn't want to miss it.
Do you remember coming home and going, oh my God, it didn't tape?
I remember going on a trip and setting it up to tape a whole bunch of shows, because I had it like a VCR where you could program more than one, and like spending an hour trying to set it up to tape all my shows while it was away. Like ER was another one that I used to love to watch. But what I loved about it, though, is that you would go to work the next day or wherever, and everybody was talking about it.
Everybody was talking about it. It was so cool.
It was really cool because you had this feeling of community that now, you can still, no, I haven't watched that yet. It's on my list, or I don't have Amazon or whatever. So certainly there's things every once in a while, there'll be a show. Like recently, everyone was talking about the Mayor of Beast.
Yes. Oh, that was really
good. Which I didn't watch, but I saw on social media, everybody was talking about it. And I thought that was cool because you don't get that very much anymore, where everyone's watching simultaneously and guessing who might have done it or whatever. So that period was very different for television. And also, have you guys watched the Friends reunion yet?
No, it's on the list. There you go. But have you seen it? Have you either? No. So Anita, you haven't. Kathy, did you?
Not yet.
I did watch it recently. I felt I was, it was kind of, I should, considering I host a podcast called History of the 90s, because I didn't want to initially because I was worried it would be cheesy and just, they did it just to make money. It was really well done, I have to say. And I'm hard to please on that kind of thing. So it was funny, laughed out loud a few times. The way they did it, there was a little bit of James Corden interviewing the cast, plus them reminiscing on set and old clips and bloopers. But they talked about how many millions of people watched the finale or other episodes that were billed as being big episodes. And it was like 10 million people would watch, or 11 million, or whatever. There was these huge numbers, and you just don't get that anymore. Because of the fragmented nature of television now with streamers and cable and everything. So
there's just too much choice. Like, I mean, I don't mean to be we have, but there is. It's overwhelming. You don't know what to watch. You don't know what people are watching unless you're on social media, right? It's
exactly.
crazy.
Exactly. Social media. And I often listen, there's a podcast I listen to called Pop Culture Happy Hour, and it's put out by NPR, and they just review TV shows, movies, that kind of thing, and kind of keep you up to date on what you should be watching. So
Anita and I are both writing it down.
Yeah, exactly. It's really good. It used to be a once a week thing. Now it's 5 days a week. But we used to be on Friday. They would list, the things to watch or whatever for that week. But anyway, because you do need help now to stay on top of it.
You really do.
Well, it's crazy because I feel like there's so much out there, but we're at a point now where it's like, there's nothing to watch. Like, how can there be nothing to watch?
It's because you can't decide. It's a huge commitment, right? Because there's all these things to pick. So TV for sure was a big thing. Also, I would say music, of course, different kinds of music. You mentioned grunge off the top. I just finished writing a 2-part special on grunge, the rise and the fall of grunge. And I've been watching and listening to a lot of it in the last couple of weeks while I've been researching it. And man, it brings you back when you listen or watch videos of Kurt Cobain. It really was a moment in time. Like it's frozen in time now. That those early days of the 90s, you almost remember how you felt at that time, young and, like alive. And
you woke up without pain.
Exactly. So nostalgia, there is something to nostalgia. I have heard recently there is a nostalgia therapy kind of thing where reminiscing really is good for you.
Oh, that's good to know.
For seniors in senior homes, that one of the best things to do is to sit and chat and reminisce about old days. And that makes sense. Everyone loves to do it when you get together with older friends or people. You like Sheila, if you and I get together, or with Greg, we'll talk about old radio days, right? And it feels good. But
that's true. That's very true.
Yeah. So listening to music has the same effect, I find. So grunge for sure. But also, we were probably in an older category because that's the thing. It depends what age you were in the 90s. You might have been in the teens or in your 20s. I was in my 20s, so I have different memories. But a lot of my listeners are people who were in their teens. So there's a big pop element. So boy bands, NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, huge. And also Britney Spears, coming on the scene towards the end of the 90s. And even at the beginning of the 90s, there were things like Vanilla Ice and that whole, sort of rap, but pop rap, and Milli Vanilli. And
oh my God.
See how different they sound, the early 90s from the late 90s. It was that decade. So much happened in between. But again, if you want to reminisce and you want to go down memory lane, I just say find a good 90s playlist on Spotify, and it'll bring you back for sure.
Oh my gosh. And there's just so many.
So you mentioned technology as, a big thing that pushed us forward. Were there other inventions? Like, is there something that comes to mind for you in the 90s?
Well, it's funny. This isn't life-changing, or maybe it is, but online dating was actually invented in the 90s.
Really?
Match.com was the first online dating service, and it started in the 90s. And before that, people were actually using either phone services where you'd phone and leave a message. I didn't ever use one, but I remember my brother's friend did, and he'd have a voicemail box. You'd call in to see if anyone left you a message. And there were also newspaper ads that people were using. Plus, there were video dating services. So when online dating came on, obviously, now look at it, right? It's changed everything. But it did have a big impact. Like, it's kind of funny you think about it, but it helped many people who either lived in isolated communities or were in isolated groups, like LGBTQ people who couldn't maybe find someone in their small community, were given a wider area that they could meet people from. So it did obviously have a huge impact.
So, okay, so you are clearly a 90s expert with, all the research you do and just the knowledge you have living it and going through it. Do you have like favorite or top stories that you, when you were doing it, you were excited to do it because you had a lot of buy-in?
That's interesting I'm trying to think, but I lean more towards the news stories because news is my background. And I would have to say, a big moment in time at the beginning of the 90s was the fall of it was in 89, the fall of the Berlin Wall. But then in 1990, the German reunification, that whole period of, the fall of the Soviet, I find fascinating. So I loved researching it to learn more about it and to be able to tell my listeners more about what happened in Eastern Europe during that time period. But any of the music stuff I really like, because I've always been a music lover. And I did have fun doing an episode on shock jocks for radio. Because
I heard that one.
Yeah. So Howard Stern obviously was a huge thing in the 90s. And I was working at Q107 when he was, Q107 picked up his feed and he was the morning host there, syndicated to Toronto. And man, did that cause like a lot of problems. So it was interesting to look back at it now with a wider lens. So,
okay. So there are stories that like we may have forgotten that should be kept top of mind. Is there something that comes to mind for you?
That's interesting that you say that. There's one story that I haven't covered on this History of the 90s, but I did on History of 1995 because it's very local and now we're trying to make it a broader story. And Sheila, I think you and I talked about this before, and it's the Lost Boys from Oshawa, the 6 young men who disappeared one night in 1995. They were all, around 15, 16, 17 years of age, and they had been at a party that night. They walked down to the waterfront to a marina, and from what, they can tell, the boys went on either a pedal boat of some kind, or it was called a water tricycle, and went out in Lake Ontario and were never seen again. It was March, it was cold, but the part that people found interesting is that nothing was ever found. Not a shoe, not a hat, not a scarf, not the vessels, nothing. So it became this, this search for months and months and months. But to this day, there's, as always, there's conspiracy theories and theories about what might have happened, where they might have been. They might have got across Lake Ontario to Rochester and started new lives. And because why hasn't anything ever been found? Why did they completely vanish? So that story is something that I think about a lot, and I think about the families a lot and how hard that must be for them every year when it rolls around on the anniversary, which is March 17th, 1995. So it's over 25 years now.
Wow. I would love to hear you do a special on that. Right?
I would love to do it. And I did a short episode where I spoke to a private investigator who has been working with one of the families, and he has compiled, documents and things almost as a, like he's doing it for free as a pet project, because he's also really quite interested in finding out. But what needs to happen is some kind of like radar search or sonar search, kind of like what's happened out west with the unfortunate story of the residential school. They were able to use technology to look in the ground to find the graves, but there is also, equipment they could use on the lake as well to see when they find like shipwrecks and things like that. So, and they have a general idea still of where they should have, if they were on a the vessel that sunk, the way the tides go, these marine people can figure out where they should have been, so they have a rough idea, so they could search there, but there's money, and they need money to do it.
My gosh, we could literally talk about the 90s. Right? Oh, I mean, there's no shortage of stories. I was going to ask you if you were going to do like history of the 2000s, but I don't know if you'd ever run out of material for the 90s.
No, by the time I run out of 90s stuff, I think it'll be time to retire. So,
yeah, a friend of mine the other day said, because I was talking to her about a career change, and she was saying, no, I'm looking to simplify my life, not complicate it. And I'm thinking that's everybody our age, right? That's every mom sipping sangria.
I'm ramping down, not up. I'm ramping down.
So Kathy, plug the podcast and your social media.
So the podcast is called History of the 90s, and you can find it anywhere you stream audio. So Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all of those places. And my social media, Twitter and Facebook is at 1990s History, and Instagram, we're at that 90s podcast.
Well, that's just awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. I know you're going to be sticking around for the rest of the show, which is awesome for us. We're going to have some fun. This is Mom Sipping Sangria.
All right, it's time for Fave Finds and raise a glass or take a pass. Let's start there, Kathy. Toasting our sangria to someone or something great, or perhaps we, toss sangria over one's head for something not so great. So do you, our guest Kathy Kenzora, have something you would like to draw attention to, either negatively or positively?
I'd like to keep it positive, and I'd like to toast all of the food banks around the country, in Ontario, Mississauga in general, for the great work that they've been doing through the COVID pandemic. I've been volunteering a little bit at a food bank in our community, and I've seen firsthand the way the volunteers and the staff have really adapted during this time to make food and other services available to people who need it, even more so than ever. So I just wanted to give them a little plug and help, hopefully remind people that are listening that they're always looking for volunteers. And if you can't volunteer, they're always looking for donations.
That's amazing. And I knew you did that. And I think that's so important. Is the whole family involved, or is that just something you do on your own?
I do it on my own. I have dragged them there occasionally when I need extra help, or if they need volunteer hours at school. But it's mostly just something I've been doing on my own without them.
Nice.
I need some mummy away time.
It's true.
With lots of people around.
Exactly.
Adults. Anita, how about you?
All right. Well, mine is actually, I got to raise a glass to Kathy for that one. No, I am also raising a glass, and I'm going to raise a glass to the 90s. Now, it's allowed me this episode to just sort of like be introspective on myself. And I realized like just how impactful that decade was on my life. So I moved to Toronto. I got my first real job. I met Ian. We got married. We bought our first home, got our first dog, had our first baby, all that. And I met Sheila.
Hello. Why am I last?
If you think about doing one of those things now, it sounds exhausting. But imagine doing all that in one decade, right? Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it really is
that's
impactful.
What I'm doing.
Good. I'm raising a glass to the 90s with you for sure.
And how about you, Sheila?
Well, all that. Now mine sounds kind of, food bank and a love story and babies. Actually, no, mine is, I'm sticking to the podcast realm because in honor of Kathy, I heard a great Michelle Obama podcast where she was talking to her husband, we might know him as Barack Obama, about all the things that working moms have to deal with and how, in this specific episode, he was talking about how underappreciated working moms like all of us and our listener is as well. We need to pat ourselves on the back every so often. Yeah, so that's what I'm raising a glass to for sure. And to summer that's finally here. Let's add that in as well. We also want to toast a few of our favorite finds. We call them Fave Finds. And these are things we love and want to share with you just because. 100% sponsor free, things we dig just for the sake of digging them. Anita, what about you? And then we'll go to Kathy.
Okay, so mine is the hand cream that everyone in our household finds useful. Usually a hand cream is like, oh, this works for this person, doesn't work for that person, or makes my hands too greasy, mine, whatever. So this one is actually, it's a scent-free, and it works for everyone in the house, which is great, and hypoallergenic, all that fun stuff. And what I like about it, because it's unscented, is you can actually take essential oils if you happen to have them, and you can throw in lavender or grapefruit or anything like that, and you can make your own scent out of it. So that's my fave find. So
and it's funny, I didn't even make the connection that this connects to something we were talking about, is I have found a great app that you can use to help you find where to watch TV shows and movies that you hear about.
Do tell.
It's called Just Watch. So you download that, Just Watch, and then you set the country to Canada or wherever you're from. And then you would put in the movie or TV show you've heard about, and it'll tell you where you can stream it. Because you know how you're like, oh, I heard about this show, but where can I watch it? And there's all these different places. And then it'll tell you if you can't watch it on a streamer, it'll tell you where you can rent it or whatever. It's free to download, but that you can even create watch lists and it gives you suggestions and things like that. But I mostly like it because often I'll hear about a movie that on a US podcast, and they'll go, well, and they'll say, you can watch it on Hulu. And I'm like, I don't have Hulu, so where can I watch it? So it's called Just Watch, and it'll help you find all your favorite TV shows and movies.
Oh, you just gave me an aha moment, because we go to Just Watch, but as a website. But that's like, I'm so lazy. That's an extra step.
Yes. Yeah.
I love the idea. Simplify. That it's an app now.
There you go. So you knew about it, but that's great. So now you can do it on your phone. Yeah. You don't have to get up and go to the computer.
Exactly.
That's what it's all about just we used to try to count steps, and now we're trying to reverse steps.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, I bet you the pedometer was invented in the 90s too, Kathy. What
Probably.
do you think?
And I just want to plug my husband. In the 90s, he was trying to invent a pedometer for rollerblades.
Oh.
So when I first met him and his roommate, that was they thought they were going to get rich. They had, because everyone had rollerblades, but they wanted to be able to track how far you were going on your rollerblades. So they were trying to come up with a thing you could clip on your rollerblade, and they gave up.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Yeah, I think they that was like probably, what are those, the stepper watches that everybody, the Fitbit.
Oh, Fitbit,
they were ahead of the time. They were trying to invent a Fitbit in the 90s.
See, now here's the 2021 version of that. You actually build your rollerblades with the pedometer in it, right?
That's amazing. I love it.
That's my fave find to happen one day. I have, just because everybody's spending so much time outdoors, it's great weather. Sometimes, occasionally, it gets a little chilly at night, and I have a really reasonably priced and lovely outdoor fireplace that I'm going to be throwing up on the web. Not throwing up, but putting up. And sharing as a fave find, because it's nice just to have something like that if you can. So yes, you can find our fave finds on our website and in our newsletter. Head on over to momssipping.sangria.com, and to all those people, places, and things, we raise a glass, and of course to you as well. Cheers.
We've come to the part of the show which we call the Sangria Chronicles, featuring good news stories only that will warm your heart. Sheila, I think this one's for you.
Yes, I have a good news story. This is about a dog named Stella. Stella is a beautiful white German shepherd, and she and her brother were purchased to guard an estate near Cairo, Egypt. Turns out Stella and her brother weren't great guard dogs, but they were great at digging holes in and around their owner's palatial grounds. The owner wasn't digging that, pardon the pun. So he put Stella and her brother in a wooden pen, and they were kept there, it seems, for many months. So the neighbor of this palatial estate found out what was going on and decided to actually buy Stella and her brother from this person. She couldn't didn't keep the dogs, but she bought them and she placed them in a dog rescue, knowing that they'd be better off there than stuck in a small pen. So fast forward a few months later, and here's the good news part. We now find Stella on her way here to Canada, specifically the Toronto area, where she's going to be fostered and find a forever home. And we are Stella's foster family.
No way!
Yes.
Wow, that's so
We
great.
get to meet her in a few days, and we are super, super excited about it. She's beautiful. They're adopting her and her brother out separately because he doesn't let her be herself, and she's used to being kind of dominated. So we're going to adopt her. She looks like she's a good fit for our dog Scotia. We're gonna foster her. And
how old is she?
She's 2. She's beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
my
So she had a
goodness.
bit of a rough start, and now she's got. It was such a process. We were interviewed, and we had to fill out an application, and the grounds
How did you stumble upon that one? How did you find it?
The girls have been bugging us for another dog, and since we're all at home. They were looking, and I was saying, well, if we find the right one, it's all, when you have a dog already, it's all about not making their lives crazy, right? So we're like, we have to make sure it's good for her. So they were looking, and all these dogs were up for adoption, but they don't like other dogs, or they're going to bite your ankles, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And this one came out of nowhere, and they found her, and it just kind of happened very quickly. So we're really excited to meet her.
That's so great.
That's amazing. Sorry, Sheila, when did you say you're getting her?
We're getting her July 3rd, so in a few days.
Wow.
Yeah, we're very, very exciting. So, so that is the good news story, and I'm looking forward to actually introducing Stella to both of you, because we all hang out together. So yeah, for sure, we'll have
That's
to.
amazing.
Oh my gosh.
We'll have to do that
Well,
sometime.
congratulations. There are so many good people and stories out there. Feel free to share yours. Visit momsippingsangria.com.
We have come to the part of the show called Spill the Sangria, where we dish out funny or embarrassing stories to make us all feel better about ourselves. And we're going to shine a light on our VIP guest, Kathy Kenzora. What do you want to spill, Kathy?
Well, I'm going back to the 90s. I have done Weight Watchers many times over the course of my life. So this was a period of my life when I was on Weight Watchers. And if any of your listeners have done Weight Watchers, they know one of the things that they do for tracking your food is they give you points, and you're allowed to have so many points per day. So I was on the program, and I was working an early morning shift in radio. And I don't know, Timbits weren't new, but they were new to me. So they printed a new book for Weight Watchers with all of the points, and it said Timbits, a 1/4 point per Timbit. So I thought, wow, that's really healthy. So I started to have 12 Timbits for breakfast every morning, because that would only be 3 points, right? And I would come into work and with my little box of Timbits and my coffee and think, God, this is easy to lose weight, right? This is going to be no problem. And then maybe a month into it, there was, typo, we have a reprint of the Weight Watchers book.
No.
It was 1 point per Timbit as opposed to a 1/4 point.
Oh my
So it was like
goodness.
having 12 points.
And you only get like
Anyway, so
30 a day.
I call it the Great Timbit Fiasco, because there
You
was
should have gotten your money back.
I know, because I remember there was a Seinfeld where they thought the yogurt was fat-free, and everyone was
remember
eating it, and then they took it to a lab, and it wasn't fat, and so it was my little yogurt
my
disaster.
gosh! So, are you willing to say did you actually gain a couple of pounds over the two months
I
that you
think
were
I
in?
might have, but the funny thing is, like, looking back now, I probably didn't even need to lose any weight.
I know. Okay, there's
When I was-
another thing. Look back at pictures in the 90s, so 20, 30 years ago, and you're looking at yourself and you're like, what the hell was I think? There's nothing wrong with me. So if anyone is really young right now listening to us, you're perfect.
And that's what I say. If you have a bikini body, you need to be walking around in your bikini all the time right now. Because
Flaunt
That's
it.
right.
one day you may not. You may keep it forever, but you may not have it anymore. So
Take it from moms who have 8 kids between the 3 of us.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. Well, that is something I'm sure we can all relate to, especially the Weight Watchers too.
Man, no kidding.
Oh my God. Well, we want to thank Kathy Kenzora for being our guest. Do yourself a favor and listen to her podcast, History of the 90s. It will definitely make you think back to a time. I don't know if it's necessarily simpler, probably in some ways, but certainly impactful. So, Kathy, we just loved having you. Thanks for joining us. And we have one last thing. We are going to leave you to sip on this question. This is something that Anita's going to pose to us, and we're going to answer. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is?
So since this episode is all about like going back into the memory vault, let's go even further back. What is your earliest memory?
My earliest memory. Sheila, do you have yours right off the top of your head?
You know what it is? Sadly, I do. It's about a bug chasing me. And I remember I was so young, I couldn't reach up and open my side door. So this thing was buzzing around my head and I'm screaming and I'm trying to get the door open. And I have had a phobia of bugs ever since. So,
and how old were you?
Well, I was small enough that I couldn't reach the door handle. So I'm going to say 2 or 3. So unfortunately mine was a traumatic one. Hopefully yours is nicer, Kathy.
Well, it's funny you reminded me of, because I don't know what's my first, but this is one of my earliest where I was with a bunch of kids on our street and we were playing in a field or something, because kids could just run in fields when they were young and back in the 70s. And we were playing a game where if you picked a dandelion with the white fluff on it, you had to blow it to keep a witch away from you or something. And I couldn't blow it because didn't have enough wind power and I couldn't. So same idea. And I was desperately trying to blow the dandelion white fluff away and the witch was going to come. It's all jumbled up, but it's also traumatic.
Oh my gosh. See? I wonder why we hover over our kids and try to make them perfect. We know. Anita, what about you? Do you have one?
I do, and mine was making it traumatic for other people. No,
cool.
So, I was actually really young. I don't have a lot of memories from this time, but I remember sitting in a high chair, and my mom was trying to feed me, and I didn't want it. I kept like shaking my head or whatever. And then my godmother was there, and she's like, "Oh, let me try. I can get her to eat." She put the food into my mouth, and I literally did one of those Zerbers, and I remember seeing it go all over. I remember seeing it go all over her face and the stunned look on her face. I don't remember what happened after. I don't know if I got in big trouble or what, but yeah, I actually remember sitting in a high chair. So
oh my gosh!
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So when they say you don't really remember anything before 5, we obviously disagree because we all remember something quite young that unless you still can't blow out the the dandelion, Kathy. Have you overcome that?
Well, I still scream when I see dandelions on my lawn, but for different reasons.
So we want to pose that question to the listener as well. What's your earliest memory?
That's a really good one. That makes you think, right? All right, that is a wrap on this episode, and we'll be releasing a couple of best of shows over the summer. So happy summer, everybody. Stay safe and well.
Until next time, have a good one. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find us on our website where you'll find blogs with Sangria recipes, profiles on our guests, fave finds, and so much more.
We are Mom Sipping Sangria. Thanks again, Kathy, and cheers.
Cheers.
Are we British today?
The 90s was a great time for the Brits.
I don't remember much of the 90s, truthfully.
So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
Now do it backwards with your eyes closed. Mom Sipping Sangria is produced by Elm Podcasting. Visit elmpodcasting.com for more information.
Cha-cha-cha. Woohoo. Hello.